Hey y'all, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to talk about something that coincides, of course, with us doing a ton of edits, moving a story from being a Wattpad story into being a Wattpad book story. So we want to talk about the 8 practices that work for Wattpad but not for published books, and kind of get you guys prepared, especially if you are planning on taking your book from Wattpad and self-publishing it on like KDP. Here are some things you should take into consideration with your story, because it's not the same and the readership's not the same, and it's important to kind of meet the needs of people that are actually paying for your story.
The first thing is chapter length. We have told you guys over and over again that you should not go over 2,000, 2,100 words on your Wattpad chapters, and we will stand by that. That is true. However, with a published book, you're going to want to have like 3,300 words or so, maybe even more than that on some chapters. Our editor has told us point blank, you're going to have to combine some of these chapters. They're too short. Now, that being said, books like Crave, Tracy Wolf, she has really short chapters, but she's also, let's be honest, she's written like 70 books. So she's established. So when you're publishing your first book, traditionally you listen to what your editor says, and that's what our editor says. So just be careful about your chapter length.
The best way to know whether your chapter is complete or not is the scene done? Are we done with the scene? If it is, that's a chapter, and we're moving on to the next chapter. And some scenes last longer than others. So don't, where we are able to break in the middle of a scene in Wattpad, and that works, that does not work so well for a published book. The next thing that works so very well in Wattpad, but not so well in a published book, is cliffhangers. That's not to say that you can't have any cliffhangers in your story. You definitely should. But in Wattpad, because there is usually a week to a handful of days between updates, we always want to give the reader a reason to come back for more. We don't need to do that with the published book because it's all right there, and we're going to flip to the next chapter. So we don't need to end every single chapter in the middle of something and leave it as a cliffhanger. You want your scenes to naturally transition from one to the other. So when we close out a chapter and we're done with that scene, we're setting it up for what's going to happen in the next chapter, and that's all tying in together. So you kind of have this cohesiveness going throughout the book, and it reads really nicely.
The third thing are book covers. It's great on Wattpad to have a sexy cover with a shirtless guy, a girl in a bra. Oh, wait, that's what we have on the cover of Spellbound, and it's done great. Wattpad people even loved it. The heads of the departments loved it, but they know that it's not right for books on a shelf. Look, we've said a million times, read what you want. I'm not judging you for what you read. But there is a difference in going out and reading a book in public that looks like, I don't know, this, versus the book right above your head, which is Spellbound. I don't think most people would sit on a train with that in their hand. Most people wouldn't do it. You know, when you're on your Kindle, that's why Kindle Unlimited covers work so well. You're on your Kindle, nobody knows what you're reading. You could be reading God knows what. I Kissed the Coronavirus, which is actually a book, by the way. You could be reading anything and nobody would know. But when it's on a bookshelf that people are going to be seeing, children are going to be walking by and seeing them, whether or not they're looking at them, they're going to see them. You just got to have a book that's got a marketable cover. So be prepared when you move from Wattpad and your sexy cover to a traditionally published platform, even if it's an indie publisher, they're going to have you tone that down.
The fourth thing that does not work for traditionally published books but works amazing for Wattpad are the hooks. We've always told you, when you are writing for Wattpad, to jump right into the story. Get right into the action. Let's go. Don't waste time. We've got to hook them from the beginning. There's a little bit of a difference with traditionally published books, and that is that you need to set the scene a little bit more, and your readers aren't necessarily looking for it to be totally hooky right off the bat. You usually still want a really good first line, like a good first line hook. But the way it's been described to us, thanks to our editor, thanks Deanna, is to think of it as you are in a movie and you're floating in and you're coming in onto the scene. And so that really does change. It does not really work well to be super descriptive like that on Wattpad. You kind of need to be really catchy and get them drawn in, and especially when it comes to romance, you're really like trying to get them into all that right off the bat.
That kind of takes us into the fifth one, which is pacing. Wattpad stories are moving super fast. You got to keep the reader engaged because there's a million other free stories they could go to if yours isn't moving fast enough. In traditionally published books, you have time to take a breather and describe things a little bit more, add a little more internal dialogue, really put the glue that holds these, things together instead of it just like boom, boom, action, 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 action. You can really put in more description.
Number 6, we talked about this just a little bit at the beginning of the video, but we'll touch on it again, and that is chapter transition and finishing out the scene and moving from one chapter to the next. You can have it kind of choppy on Wattpad because it feels like you're coming back to it with such a break because of the update schedule. It does not work with a traditionally published book, again, because it's all there. So we need to make sure that everything feels like it's like got this nice flow to it, and it's moving into from this scene into this scene, and it's all making sense.
Yep.
And so having those really hard stops that don't address anything from prior chapters, those hard stops are okay in Wattpad. Not so okay in a traditionally published book.
Number 7, copyright. Copyright on Wattpad is not really, honestly, it's not really that big of a deal. We talked about in previous videos using song lyrics and that kind of thing. Pretty much nobody's going to come after you on Wattpad. Unless you're in a paid story, which they would never let that go in a paid story. But if you're writing for Wattpad for free and not making any money, chances are no one's going to come for you. You can use movie quotes, you could use whatever if you're giving credit to the people. But even if you give credit to the people in a published book, you can't do that. And we learned that the hard way. We had a really great moment. If you've read Spellbound, you're going to know what I'm talking about before I even say it. We had a really great moment with one of the love interests and our main character. And he's like professing his love for her and uses a quote from the Notebook. And we were immediately told, you can't use that because those words belong to Nicholas Sparks. And I'm like, oh, yeah, they do. Even though I gave him credit, we still can't use it. So now we have to completely rewrite that moment and figure out how we're going to make that especially cringy for that particular character, because we have to. We have to figure out a new way to do it. Because that's just one of the things that we're going to have to look at, which we didn't have a lot of copyright stuff, so we shouldn't have to look at too much of that. But on Wattpad, you can get away with that because nobody's going to say anything, but you can't get away with that in a published book.
Number 8, and our final point, is romance with a so-so plot. Works amazing on Wattpad because Wattpad is mostly the readers are there for the romance. Let's just face it, we have a few people that are there for plot-driven stories that are not romantic, but for the most part, we want the romance. Give us the steam, bring in the romance. And the plot, who cares, as long as that's a great romance going on. So, we, of course, you can't just write a book about a romance and have no depth or plot, and it's not going anywhere, and it's just about the day-to-day dating habits of two people. Nope, it has to have something else there. It has to be a little bit more real chunky. Need some more chunk in there.
Meaty.
Give me some meat. Your story might do really well and get millions of reads on Wattpad with a really great romance and not much more, but not going to do good on a bookshelf.
So, those are the things that work on Wattpad but aren't going to work for your traditionally published novels. So, if you want to go read the Wattpad version of Spellbound for free while you still can, go over to Crystal and Felicity.
And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Help us out. That helps us out in the algorithm. Go over, subscribe to our channel. Come on, there's new people subscribing every day. You should be one of them. And lastly, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a Friday upload.
And as always, write what you love.